So back in the early 1970s, one of the first episodes of Saturday Night Live, which I think was the highest culture show around at the time, was doing all of these spoof advertisements. And one of them really struck a chord. And it was Madison Avenue's version of the evolving economy's Superwoman. And it showed a woman who was beautifully made up, her hair was absolutely gorgeously done, walking into a 5,000 square foot immaculately clean kitchen with 3 bags of groceries, which she put down on the counter, and she started unpacking, and she looked at the camera, and she said, "Hi, I'm an astrophysicist and a mother of 4. And she kept unpacking the groceries and looked at the camera, and she said, "Yes, oh, I do. I run the carpool, and I do volunteer at the hospital." And she kept unpacking the groceries, and she said, "What's that? Oh, my favorite hobbies. Well, those would be skydiving and deep sea diving." She finished unpacking the groceries. She took the bags and folded them very neatly, opened a cabinet with 2,000 neatly folded and stacked bags, looked back at the camera, and she said, "What's that? Oh, you wonder how I do all of this? I'm on speed." And I thought that was the most effective commercial I'd ever seen. And in the end, it was absolutely true, because the nature of the game today is not about change. Change has been with us since the beginning of time. It is about the speed of change. And we're all on speed, and we keep forgetting that. We keep thinking that everything is operating the way it always did historically, in cyclical terms, the way it always did historically, at the same rate it always did historically. But at the same time, we know with every part of our viscera that everything is speeding up faster and faster and faster, to the point where even today we stink at leisure. We have to do everything so much of the time. You get a day off, you build a deck. So when we think about the rapidity of the speed of change, and we take a look at the economy, certain things start to fall into place. Back in the early 1990s, it occurred to us that there was a transformation taking place. Peter Drucker was saying that we were moving into a knowledge economy or a service economy. Others were calling it the leisure economy, the communications economy, the information economy. There were all kinds of names for it, and we weren't happy with any of those names in our shop because they figured they didn't help our clients understand what they should be doing in terms of products and services and invention and activity and public relations and employment and investment. So we took a look at 3 years of the work that we had done before that. We generate a lot of information on a regular basis. We look at 3 years' worth of this and answered 3 questions. Where's disposable income going? Where are the jobs being created? And what's the MO, the modus operandi? And it occurred to us in 1992 that after looking at all this material and putting it into appropriate buckets, there were really only 2 questions. Where's the disposable income going? Because that's where the jobs are being created, and where the jobs are being created is where disposable income is going. And the MO, the modus operandi. In the early 90s, if you remember, what was happening was a lot of technologies were starting to come together. And in that synergy, they were creating efficiencies in the economy that were throwing people out of work who were in the businesses and the jobs that we thought were going to be the ones of the future. We saw enormous layoffs taking place in Nippon Telephone and Telegraph, AT&T, Xerox. Some of you may remember Wang, the company that was here, big and gone. And so technologies were rapidly transforming the landscape, and with it, the jobs that people had and the way that we were spending our money. So we went back through history and took a look at this and realized we had been through these transformations before. Nothing new about this. It was a confluence of advanced technologies that, coming together, made the agricultural economy so efficient that we moved into the industrial economy. And it was a series of technologies that, coming together, made the industrial economy so efficient that we didn't need people there, and we moved into the post-industrial economy. And now, in the early 90s, we were saying the post-industrial economy is so efficient That's why we're laying off all these people, and we're moving into what we then called the Emotile Economy. We said then, in the early 90s, that if you look back over history, this is the math, and this is the logic, and this is the conclusion. Tens of thousands of years in the agricultural era, 200 in the industrial, 45 in the post-industrial. We were lucky if we could eke 25 out of the Emotile, and we figured that somewhere around the year 2005, we would begin to see a new economy rearing its head because of the confluence of technologies, and it would once again create a transformation with its efficiencies, throwing a lot of people out of work and creating yet whole other new businesses that would then, over time, reemploy them. But what is happening? When you look at tens of thousands of years, a couple of hundred years, 45 years, 25 years, 12 years, it's easy for you to see, just as we did, what the consequences are. The speed of change is so fast, and the transformation's coming so fast, that we don't have the time to build up the new industries and the new possibilities in order to employ all the people that are not needed in the prior economy. We don't substitute economies. Economies are layered on top of each other. We are still an agricultural economy. We depend a great deal on it. But here in the United States, as an example, only 3% of our working population is fully employed in agriculture. We have not done away with the industrial economy. It's layered on top of the agricultural. But here in the US, as an example, only 11% of our fully employed population is working there. And we could go up the chain that way, with each succeeding economy being put on top of the other. More and more people migrate up that and leave the earlier ones. And with that, we wind up also spending less of our disposable income in those former economic sectors. I remember when the first handheld calculator was introduced by Texas Instruments, it was $1,500. Today, you get more calculating power in a singing birthday card. I remember when the first portable telephones were introduced. They weighed a ton, they cost a fortune, and you had to be very, very important and rich to have one. Today, if you say to somebody, I'm going away for 2 weeks and you won't be able to reach me, you have to be pretty important and rich. And of course, the cell phones cost nothing. It's not about the equipment anymore. So what happens every time you go through these transformations is that the value that you were able to eke out with all your goods and services begins to diminish. Everything becomes commoditized, and you have to find the new way of earning that income and supplying those jobs. As we look out into the future, and I know I mentioned the Motile Economy, but we don't really have time to go into that today. That is where we are today. We knew back in the early 90s that healthcare would vastly expand beyond 13% of GDP. We knew that personal safety and security would greatly grow, and that included the financial services businesses, as well as the concern for terrorism. Again, we wrote this model in 1992. We knew a lot of the things that were going to happen. But what I want to do with you today is give you this upbeat message, which has a downbeat tone to it. The downbeat tone is that it's not happening fast enough to absorb everybody. The growth areas, the transformation is happening so fast that they are being thrown out of work. But we do see 8 value propositions ahead. We call this next economy the metaspace economy. We call it that because all of the growth propositions are around altered dimensionality, and that dimension is space. I'll rattle them off and then stop, go back, and explain them very briefly. They are inner space, outer space, cyberspace, microspace, time space, design space, green to blue space, and storage space. One at a time. Inner space. It is the understanding of what makes living things tick. We are increasingly mapping the human brain, animal and plant brains as well, but the human brain, and you're going to see the prefix neuro in front of everything over the next 10 years. Neuromarketing, neuroeconomics. Some of the things we're learning are staggering. We know, for example, that humans form most of their brains, their connections and networks most rapidly before the age of 3. When I was a child, if somebody said coochie coochie coo 3 times a day, that was high stimulation. My son had a mobile in his crib. He had a playpen full of toys. He had toys in his stroller. My grandnieces and nephews don't stay in playpens. They have 4 mobiles in their crib. They have bumper guards that honk and squeak and reflect and constantly give them feedback. They have rooms full of toys, homes full of toys, back of the car full of toys, and strollers that weigh 450 pounds. By the time they are 6 months, they have a toy phone. By the time they're 9 months, they have a toy computer. By the time they're a year and a half, they have a real computer and they're accessing porn sites. And then at the age of 5, we put them into the same school system that our great-great-great-grandparents went to. And when these new minds that we have just created to multi-process and not pay attention for very long periods don't fit the school systems that suited our ancestors, instead of changing those institutions fundamentally, we drug the kids. So how are we going to get that kind of innovation in the future when basically those kinds of brains are constantly coloring outside the lines? I mean, I know that as an adult, I probably would have been diagnosed with ADHD, and when we were kids, we were just called conduct cases. And we were punished, but we were never drugged, but we wound up to grow up to do some of the most amazing things, and we're drugging that out of our future generation. So we have to change the education system profoundly along the lines of what we know about the brain and how it develops and what it does. We know that boys and girls learn differently. We know they have physiologically different brain structures. We know that all of us have very different brains. We know that sensorially we have been off the mark forever in terms of our thinking about our senses, except if we go back to some ancient traditions and wisdoms. We think in terms of 5 senses, maybe 6, if we give intuition its day. But the fact is we also have a sense of time, a sense of balance, a sense of direction, a sense of fear. And not only that, but we know that our sensory parts operate in such a way that they combine and recombine, and every single experience is almost a different sensory experience. So we know so much more about the brain, and we're going to see so much more of that applied. And that will create growth engines. That will create change in everything from healthcare to education to marketing and so many things ahead. If we look at inner space, there is an acronym we use for that, and that's BANG Fuel, BANGFUEL. And that stands for bits, atoms, antimatter, neurons, genes, frequencies, and vibrations, and ultra and infraspectral energy and light. Aren't you glad I don't have PowerPoint? Basically, the story is the combination and recombination of all of those things that will completely change the picture in the future. For everything from energy to health, it will affect so many sectors. Nanotechnology, some of you, I mean, you all have probably heard the term. Nano simply means billionths of. A nanometer is a billionth of a meter, a nanosecond is a billionth of a second. We will be doing things at the nano level, including nanofabrication and self-assembly, that will change materials technology, which in turn will change so many processes and products and will revolutionize everything out into the future. If we take a look at cyberspace, we know that so much is going on in that ether, in what is not real. Here in the United States, we're pretty naive considering what's going on elsewhere. In South Korea, the majority of young women spend the majority of their waking days in Cyworld. The majority of young men spend the majority of their waking days in cart life. We know that there are hikikomori in Japan who lock themselves in rooms for 15 years and don't come out. These young males, mostly males, who just live in the virtual world. If I asked you, what is the currency that is most challenging China today, it happens to be virtual currency. These things are changing the way we work, the way we live, the way we love. We know that in countries like Japan, there are virtual lovers. They have images on their cell phones that are all the same, but these images change in terms of how much love they will give you, depending upon how much real money you spend on virtual flowers, virtual perfume, virtual dinners, until you get this image to really love you. And these guys love them. And of course they do, because the imbalance between males and females in that part of the world is enormous. enormous. It's around 20 million in India, in China. It's big in Japan because of female infanticide and so many other things. So even love will move to cyber, but there are companies already cashing in on this. There's a hotel chain that checks you in as a cyber pair, even if you are one person, and caters to you as if you were two. Ingenuity will rebound tremendously out there. So cyberspace, so much going on in there that's going to change the nature of everything out into the future. Then we have time space, the leveraging of time in space. We have never valued time in the economy. We're going to learn how to do it. Time is seen as the new luxury. If you ask everybody today, what do you want more of and don't have enough of, the answer is time. And so we will be seeing that as part of the economic equation, and new products and services will come along to value that and change in order to value that. And then if we think about outer space, satellites, space exploration, other intelligences from other parts of the world. You know, when the Vatican and the History Channel take extraterrestrial intelligence seriously together within the last 5 years, something's going on there. So we know, and that's a big economic part of the pie. I mean, the best-selling movie ever a couple of years ago was Avatar. So, and then this year we had Cowboys and Aliens. What could get better than that? So we know that this is going to be huge economically in the future. And then we have green to blue space. You can do green, and there's no big deal anymore in that. You can be green, and that is very expensive. And you can go to blue, which means putting back more than you took. What is that? There are things like ecotecture, which says that if you can basically train a tree to be a bonsai, then you can grow a park bench, you can even grow a house. There's a social entrepreneur that takes blighted, abandoned industrial properties and grows sunflower seeds. The sunflower fields are beautiful, raises the real estate prices of everything around, employs people to cut the sunflowers, sell them at market, and so on. So we're looking at urban and near-urban agriculture, which will be kind of blue. It starts bringing food closer to cities where now more than half of humans live, as opposed to having to travel so far to get there. So blue is where a lot of economic potential comes in the future. And then we have design space, and we know that design is going to become one of the most important, leverageable, competitive differentiators in the marketplace. And it's not just what something looks like, it's what it sounds like, it's what it feels like, and it's not just things, it's systems and it's operations, everything. Design will become very, very important. So we have inner space, outer space, cyberspace, time space, microspace, design space, green to blue space, and the last one, storage space. We're running out of room for our personal junk. That is becoming the largest business in this country. We're running out of room for space in our brains to store information. We're running out of room to store data. Companies like GE are creating holographic chips so that we can store more data. You just heard from Pablos what some of the issues are in storing nuclear waste. And the electronic waste that we are generating is the biggest pollutive problem on this planet. We have no idea what to do with all this waste. We ship it to China, and then we're shocked that it comes back to us in toys. So we have these 8 growth areas. We're going to see enormous activity in there. All I want to leave you with is this. What you keep hearing from the economists is that this is a recession. What they keep talking about is the recovery. They talk about a jobless recession. They talk about a double dip. And I'm going to ask you to please don't listen to economists anymore. They don't know what they are talking about. This is not a recession. It is a fundamental transformation. Let's start getting on with the new. Stop protecting the old. Let's take the barriers away from people being able to exceed in the economy, whatever skill or talent they have. Let's get off this thing that everybody has to go to college. That was for 2 economies ago. Right now, we need a lot of skills and a lot of talents, and we need a future that is about the future, not about the past. Thank you.